I see dead games, and I play dead games. Because after all, if a game is technically dead, that is not supported anymore, we live in a time of constant presence in which everything is always available. So the components are still available out there, and if the game is not supported, is not considered super cool and fancy, is not part of the cult of the new, then I can acquire a lot of components for a reasonable price. I can put together my collection, and I can have a lot of gameplay options, again, without having to spend a fortune. This is exactly what happens with Star Wars Miniatures, a game that for whatever reason came to my attention only recently. Originally it is from 2004, not old enough to be vintage, I guess just old enough to be old. Set in the world of Star Wars, a game that comes with pre-painted miniatures of, I would say, good quality, at least for me. The sculpt seemed pretty good to me, or at least the one that sculpture that I saw. The paints, well, it will never be good enough for the people that like to paint their own miniatures, for whom painting miniatures is a vital part of the hobby. I'm not one such player. I don't paint miniatures. I don't have the time, the energy, the concentration, the manual skill, nothing. So for me, the fact that the miniatures of Star Wars miniatures do come with paint, which is good enough for me, thematic enough for me, is a big plus. So a miniatures game, you will, if you want to start playing it, the suggestion, of course, is to acquire one of the various starter sets that are out there, and then you can expand by buying blind boosters. Some are still available out there, otherwise there are a lot of lots of singles that are available online, and then you can put together your collection. It's a combat game. I go, you go, I fire, you fire. I try to cut you into with my lightsaber, and you try to dodge, and we see what happens. So, combat system, very simple, very, very basic combat system that allows you, however, to recreate actions from iconic movies or iconic cartoons. Or Star Wars, or also allows you, which is really fun, to mix and match different miniatures and create all sorts of situations like Anakin Skywalker versus Darth Vader. One of those, I guess, in Star Trek, one of these loops, temporal loops, or whatever thing. But you can create all sorts of things. In any case, let me show you how Star Trek miniatures works, because if it just so happens to also work for you, then, well, you just have here another play option that you will be able to embrace, and for which you will be able to build a collection without too much effort and without too crazy an expenditure of money. Let's see how it works. The game has several starter sets. Revenge of the Sith is one of them, definitely the biggest one, and the one that comes with the biggest box, which is useful because I actually bought several other starter sets. There are other ones set in during the Clone Wars, and then there are other expansions that give you maps and similar materials. And so I used the box of the starter set called Revenge of the Sith to store all of my maps and the various rule boxes that come from all the sets. So very, very convenient. The rules are these or this. So it's pretty much, that means that the core game is very simple. This sheet tells you all that you need to get started. Then if you want to get into some more detail, then you also have the full manual that comes in another one of the starter sets. Basically, to start playing the game, you will need at least a starter set, you will need some miniatures, you will need one of these maps, and there is a good variety of maps available out there, and pretty simple. Well, first you set up your map, open it, lay it flat. I don't even know that I'm gonna do the whole thing just for demonstration purposes. I think this will be sufficient. And as I said, you need miniatures. Starter sets, if you purchase several starter sets, you'll get a good starting collection. Cool stuff The website has a lot of single miniatures. You can go on eBay and find some of those lots. That's a quick way of getting like a large number of miniatures for reasonable prices. But then when you're buying those lots, you don't choose exactly what you want. Cool Stuff has singles, so you can buy exactly what they want, and the price I found is more or less the same as if you buy a large lot on eBay. Footnote, I'm not affiliated with Cool Stuff. I'm not getting money. This is not advertisement, just a recommendation from Gamer to Gamer. That's a place where you can find singles for Star Wars miniatures at reasonable prices. And so you will have your miniatures. And here, for example, I have the Independents, the Scoundrels. Each miniature is, well, guess what? It has a miniature and a card with the stats of that card. Well, these are not Scoundrels, but I had some room in that drawer. That's why I placed them there. Here I have my miniatures for the dark side, some stormtroopers, lots of droids, some notable characters such as Darth Vader, General Grievous. I have 2 Grievous because he's in 2 starter sets, so, well, so be it. And other characters that I bought. I like the Clone Wars, I like the Night Sisters, so I needed to have the Night Sister Witch. And then, of course, we have the good guys, the light side, with a mix of Jedis, Clone Troopers. I have a lot of Clone Troopers, other characters that I like very much. Luminara, she was in one of the standard expansions. Ahsoka, she was in an expansion, I bought her as a single. And so on and so forth. So what happens? Each character has a card that also has on one side the illustration, on the back. On the back you have the stats. First, the number up here is simply the cost of that character in terms of points, and before the game starts you decide how many points you want to use. 100 points, 120, 150, these are good for a standard battle. So you collect cards and the corresponding miniatures up to that number of points. The basic stats are the hit points, that is life points. When they go down to 0, the miniature is dead. Defense, that is the protection, armor class, like we used to call it back in the day. Attack, that's the bonus that you will add to your die roll when you're attacking. And damage, number of damage points that you inflict, that you subtract on the from the hit points of the opponent when you hit them. Characters may have no special abilities or may have a lot of special abilities. They may also have force powers, and that's the number of points that you have. You will use tokens to mark them. And you can spend force powers to activate various effects. Luminara, for example, she can spend force points to perform a lightsaber riposte. She's a master of speed. She has other abilities, etc., etc., etc. So the two sides select their forces, pick up their miniatures. I'm just getting a bunch of random ones. Set them up on the board, decide on objectives that they want to achieve, or simply, so I guess they can play like a specific scenario, or maybe they just decide to play a slugfest and simply move around the board and slaughter each other, which is a perfectly reasonable, perfectly respectable thing to do. Again, I don't have time to lay flat the paperboard or put it under a piece of plexiglass, so, well, it will just look like it's more of a hilly terrain than it otherwise would. When it is your turn, you activate 1 or 2 characters. You will want to use tokens to mark the characters that you have activated. When you activate a character, the character can move up to 6 movement points. Moving orthogonally from square to square costs a movement point. Moving diagonally 2 movement points is a very simple mechanism, and it may also seem strange that Anakin and a little Jawa would move exactly the same speed into their game effects that give you more modifications, that give you a little more nuance when it comes to movement points, but the default number is 6 for everybody. So You activate one or two of your characters when it is your turn, and with the activated character, you can move and attack, or attack and then move, or move twice. And in some cases, some characters can attack twice. When you move, there are some areas that have red edges. These are impassable and block line of sight. There are also some yellow edges, which are impassable, but they do not block line of sight. They represent low obstacles or pools, holes in the ground, that sort of thing. And once you have moved, you can attack. Some characters will only have melee attacks, or maybe some people have force attacks, but some only have melee, and then you need to be adjacent to the enemy. Other characters have range attacks, and then you only need to have a line of sight and to be in range if it is an attack that has a specific range. Attacking is simplicity itself. It is like old school. You roll a d20, you add the modifier, you add the attack modifier of your character. If the total is equal to or higher than the defense of the target, you inflict damage, and then you subtract your damage factor from the hit points of the opponent. If that leads the opponent, brings the opponent down to 0 or fewer hit points, the opponent is eliminated. Otherwise, well, the opponent takes the damage recorded using tokens, and the opponent is still there. You continue like this, alternating one or two activations per side until all characters have activated or passed, and the turn is over. You continue like this until the victory conditions for the scenario have been reached. I really like this game. In its simplicity, to me, it works. It clearly is one of these games where the main engine is meant to be incredibly simple, because then they're gonna build a scaffold of extra rules, special rules, exceptions to those rules, special rules concerning those exceptions, etc., etc. Intricate interconnections of effects all around that core system. And if that core system is messy, then of course the entire structure becomes completely unwieldy, the center cannot hold, and the game cannot be played. The game is so simple. I activate one or two characters, move, attack, roll against your armor class, meet or exceed that number, inflict damage. It is that simple. And yet, the effects that are around there, of course, give a lot of flavor to the game, but also a lot of tactical possibilities, like Jedis that block non-melee attacks, force blasts, night witches using their spells, commanders giving bonuses to specific types of units that surround them, vehicles. I didn't show you those, but there's also a possibility of using vehicles, miniatures that interact with those vehicles. I would say everything has some specific favorite interactions and specific things that they do. But it does not become overwhelming. To me, this game really hits a soft spot. For example, I also play HeroClix with my daughter Amelia, and sometimes the chains of events become a little intricate. I'm like, this game is just a little too Byzantine for me moving around and rolling dice. I still enjoy HeroClix, but I have to say, between the two, I think I prefer Star Wars miniatures. There are similarities there. You don't have the clicks. You still use good old numerical counters to take to keep track of how many hit points are left on each of your characters. But to me, the balance between the simplicity of the basic system, the flavor and tactical options that come from the special effects, really work well together and give me just a level of complexity that, well, it's interesting to exploit, and I want to see what I can do in my miniatures, what synergies I can create, how can I make my miniatures interact with the environment and deal with the synergies that you have created. I have all of these things that come together, but they're still very manageable. They still feel very thematic and very playable. I'm sure it also may come from the fact that I only recently started playing this game. Some of you may have devoted long studies to the system and may have found the meta secret, the list, the army list that breaks all army lists and rules them all. But I haven't. and I have played the game with adult friends. I played the game with my daughter Amelia, who is 6, and I enjoyed it with adults as well as with my daughter. My daughter is exactly in that age where, adding 6 to 15 or adding 8 to 17, she knows how to do it. She can do it just with a little bit of effort. So we're just that perfect moment where she can do it. It's a little bit of a challenge, so she's doing a little bit of math exercise without knowing it. When she'll become completely conversant with the mathematical operations that surround these numbers, the scale of numbers here, then we'll still play the game, because it's not like the pedagogical aspect is the point, because the game per se is very thematic. Again, it feels like a war game. It is a tactical war game. It is thematic. It captures the spirit and the feel of Star Wars. Really, the characters act like they should. They have the limitations and advantages that you expect from them. It really captures that feel in a system which is just so flexible, because you can create any sort of battle that you want, and that is so playable. Really, playability here is king. There are many games out there that have the same objective, but to me this one does it particularly well. To me, this is like a notch above many other expandable miniature games that try to do the same thing. Here's the basic game. Now we're going to overwhelm you with all of the special effects, individual cases, etc., etc. Here, I really get the sense that you have a system that is enriched by the unique abilities of the characters rather than overwhelmed. So thematically is interesting. Different themes will bring different tactical challenges to the board. And again, it's a sandbox, depending on how much you want to invest. And the collection that you will put together, then this is a game that really works as a sandbox. Play it with your kids as an introductory war game. Play it with your adult friends who love Star Wars, or simply adult friends that you want to introduce to wargaming. This also works to me as a pretty good gateway war game, or does it? Meaning that still this feels very different from other games, say X Encounter war games at the regimental level with lines of supplies and that sort of thing. But at least you're getting your friends used to the idea that it's fun to play combat games, and then of course you can gradually move them towards that other aspect of the hobby. Per se, however, Star Wars Miniatures is a really good game. I have been enjoying it so much. You can't tell how much I've been enjoying it. I look forward to playing it more. I have some friends which also have kids, and I've invited them over. We're gonna have this transgenerational play date. Me and another friend, my daughter Amelia, and his 5-year-old son, playing together, because really it is a game that is that simple. Even a little kid can understand the mechanics. Somebody under 6 or 7, you may have to do some math for them, but they'll get the general concepts. And of course, you play with adults, then there are more layers of depth, and there's still enough to keep you interested. Really fun game. I'm very happy that it's dead. As brutal and callous as it sounds, because this way I don't have to wait for the next booster that comes out, the next special expansion. Everything is out there. I can acquire exactly what I want, little by little, whenever I decide, well, I like to play that scenario, with some Wookiees, and then I just grab a bunch of Wookiees and I create that scenario. The fact that the game died and the components are all still out there for grabs, so that you can design exactly the type of experience that you want, to me is a plus. So sorry that you died. Star Wars Miniatures is dead. Long live Star Wars Miniatures, because I believe this is a game that will stay. It will stay in my collection, and not just physically. Like, in a sense, like this game is here to stay. Not physically, but as an experience, because it is a game that I can actually pull out and set up very easily and teach so easily, then I think it's a game that really has, I can get a lot of mileage out of it. I can play it with a lot of different people. So I think this is a game that is gonna hit the table quite often. Star Wars Miniatures is that, but doesn't have to stay that forever. Have a look at it, give it a try. I was pleasantly surprised, and I'm really, really happy that I gave it a try because I love it, and everybody I played it with really enjoyed it.